Welcome to the National Czech and Slovak Museum. Today we will be performing a concert that features 4 musicians. 4 of our pieces today will feature 4 violins. Mike Hall on violin, Diane Hall on violin, Bryce Christensen on violin, and I will also be playing violin. Then we will also be playing string quartets, where we will have a viola player and a violinist also playing the cello part. On those pieces, I will be playing first violin, Beth Hoffman. Diane Hall will be playing second violin. Mike Hall will be playing viola, and Bryce Christensen will be playing the transcribed cello part. The order of our performance is as follows. We will be playing an arrangement of a famous piece, Humoresque, for 4 violins. Then we will be playing 2 movements of the American String Quartet, followed by a piece called Going Home, and finally, Deep River. The last 2 selections are spirituals.
Hi, I'm Bryce Christensen.
And I'm Mike Hall. For this project, in addition to playing, each of us has taken on additional roles. I am the video person, and Bryce is our historian researcher, so I'm going to be asking him some questions about the music we're performing today. So Bryce, how did Dvorak become famous?
Well, it's a long story. Dvorak really did become famous until he was about 33. He was born in a small village next to Prague, which is the capital of Bohemia. And when he was a young man, late teens, he moved to Prague to enter organ school. And while he was in organ school, he played in numerous bands and orchestras as a violist. And he did that for a number of years. And then he obtained a job in what was called the Provisional Theater in Prague. And that theater is a theater where they perform operas and plays. And the reason why he did this, he was so poor at the time that he couldn't afford to really listen to buy tickets. So he decided he'd play in the orchestra. And so that's how he ended up getting a job there. In 1871, however, he gave up his job in the Provisional Theater to devote more time to composing. By 1873, Dvorak had achieved success in Prague as a composer, but he was still struggling financially. In 1874, he applied for and won the Austrian State Prize for composition. Now, when I say Austrian, Bohemia at that time was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And so this Austrian State Prize was for the whole empire, for the musicians that were composing. So Dvorak submitted 15 compositions, 2 of which were symphonies. So that's a lot of music. There were 3 members of the jury that awarded Dvorak the prize. The most famous member was Johannes Brahms, who was at the time among the most famous composers in all of Europe. Brahms was extremely impressed with the talent of Dvorak, and he remained so to the end of his life. Dvorak again won the same prize in 1876 and 1877, and the money that Dvorak won from these prizes tremendously helped him financially, and the strong support of Brahms helped Dvorak get his music published across internationally. Brahms recommended Dvorak's music to his own publisher, Simrock. In 1878, Dvorak submitted his Slavonic dances to Simrock, and this music became an immediate and a great success.
Could you tell us more about Dvorak's connection to Brahms?
Well, Brahms was the who's who as far as who to get connections with. He was the most, I would say, the most famous composer, if not among the most famous composers in all of Europe. Brahms was a composer. He preferred highly structured music based on Beethoven. Beethoven was his mentor. I mean, actually, he wasn't alive when Beethoven was alive, but Brahms highly admired Beethoven, so he built his composing around Beethoven's ideas. And so when Dvorak submitted his music for the competition, Brahms really really admires music is in many ways that their music was quite similar to each other.
Right. What was one of Dvorak's most popular compositions?
Well, Dvorak composed 7 Humoresques for the piano in 1894, and Humoresques are just, as the word implies, it's kind of a humorous sounding piece. And Dvorak became very famous for the 7th Humoresque. The Humoresque was arranged for many different instruments at the time, and groups of instruments and groups of singers. And in fact, it was so popular, it was one of the most popular songs written for piano. It was as popular as Für Elise by Beethoven. If you're a piano student, you know what Für Elise is.
made a trip to the United States and spent a summer in Iowa. Could you tell us more about this?
Well, Dvorak, this is in 1892, he was asked by the director of the National Conservatory in New York. The woman's name was Jeanette Ferber. She was the head, and she was also the benefactor, which means she paid for the New York Conservatory to be built. And she wanted someone to promote develop American music and promote it. And Dvorak by that time was very, very famous, and she paid him a lot of money, and he came over with his family and became the director of the National Conservatory. That's in the summer of 1893. Dvorak moved to Iowa. He spent several months in the town of Spillville, Iowa, and that he was really inspired by being out in the country, listening to nature, and in fact they had an Indian, at the time there was this group from South Dakota, it was Wild Bill Cody, or I'm trying to think of his name, oh yes, Buffalo Bill, and Sitting Bull. They had a Wild West show, and that Wild West show came over to Spillville, and so he got a chance to listen to the it was basically a kind of like a cowboy Indian show, and so he got to hear Indian music at the time, and so that really enhanced his understanding of Native American music.
So what music did Dvorak write when he stayed in Iowa?
Well, he wrote what was called the String Quartet in F, which is known as the American Quartet. String quartets, well, first of all, string quartet, you have 4 players. You have 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. And the string quartet's divided into separate sections, which we call movements. The second movement of the quartet, which is the slower movement, its bass, no one really knows this for sure, but it sounds like it's based off of Lakota Sioux Sundance. And so there's various aspects of the Sundance. There's one of the things that you hear in Native American singing is the type of notes that they use. They use what we call pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale, which is different than what we have here in Europe and America, where we have 7 notes and 7 letters to the scale, and then we have an added 8th note, which is double, which has a same letter as one of the other letters. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then if it's an A scale, it would be another A, or if it's a C scale, you would have 2 C's. So we have an 8-degree scale, and but the pentatonic is a 5-degree scale. So when you listen to a scale that has 5 degrees, it kind of gives a mysterious, open sound, kind of a dreamy sound, and that's what you hear when you hear the Native American singers. And while they're singing, they have drums playing, or a drum. I saw a video where all these Native American men were all beating the same drum, and so you have this drumming in the background with the singing. One of the ways in which the Native American singers sing is that they start off really high and they go low. It's really, if you just have to listen to it, it's just an amazing sound. And so while they're singing, you hear the drum beat in the background. Well, Dvorak seemed to imitate that in a way, because you have the first violin and the cello doing that same type of melody where it starts off high and then it goes low. And then you, with the other instruments at the same time are plucking the strings. So they're kind of like the drum beat. They're keeping a steady rhythm while the melody is going on. So in that way, Dvorak imitated the song of the Native American singers singing with the drums.
Dvorak ever try to imitate the sounds of nature in his music when he was writing the music for this quartet?
Well, in the third movement, Dvorak tried to imitate the sound of what he thought was a scarlet tanager, which is a bright-winged bird. And he was kind of annoyed by this sound, but he used it in his third movement. In fact, there's certain measures where he actually says this is the bird call that he heard. And so it does sound like a bird call. And actually also, if you listen to the whole third movement, it sounds like birds singing to each other, like in a conversation. So that movement's quite realistic. But I guess with those people that are bird experts actually say it wasn't a scarlet tanager, it was a red-eyed vireo, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it, red-eyed vireo bird. And they believe that's the bird they actually heard. So anyhow, I think there's a strong case, even Dvorak said himself, that he was imitating the scarlet tanager. And another aspect of Dvorak is, yes, he imitated the birds in his music, but Dvorak doesn't imitate literally. He creates an impression in his music. So it's a combination of a little bit of literal copying of the sound of the birds, but it's more of the impression of being outdoors and hearing the birds sing. And that's really what Dvorak's famous for. He was able to get the essence of especially being outdoors, what it's like to be outdoors in the open spaces. And you can hear that in his music, and that's really why he was such a genius in conveying those feelings in his American Quartet, and also in his symphony called the New World Symphony.
for their Dvorak's music?
Well, when he was the director at the conservatory in New York, there was a student named Harry Burleigh, and he was a voice student. He wasn't actually a student of Dvorak, but he was kind of like his assistant. And apparently, from one of the articles that I read, he apparently would clean the hallway floors, and he would sing, and so apparently Dvorak heard him, and so they were acquainted with each other, and so what happened was Harry sang these African American spirituals to Dvorak, and Dvorak was extremely impressed. He thought he believed that the music they heard from these African American spirituals were just as good as what he had heard in Europe. So he was extremely impressed. Now, I should probably explain what African American spirituals are. Well, they go back over centuries, but at the time when Dvorak was alive, many of the African Americans were living in the southern states of the United States, and so they worked in the fields, and life was hard, and so in order to pass the time, they would sing these spirituals. It was kind of a way of lessening the load of working out in the hot sun, basically. So when they would sing about, one of the things that they sang most often was about heaven. So they were looking forward to the time that they would meet the Lord in heaven. And so that's what spirituals are about. The second movement of Dvorak's New World Symphony, now he composed an entire symphony while he was here in Iowa. And the New World Symphony, that's what he actually called it, the New World Symphony. It's his last symphony that he wrote. In the second movement of that symphony, he writes, it's a slow movement, and it sounds very much like an Afro-American spiritual. And so what happened was in 1922, a man named William Arms Fisher, who was a student of Dvorak's, wrote the lyrics to what he called "Going Home," which is the song about going home to heaven. And it really sounds just like a real African American spiritual. So that's basic. A lot of people think that Dvorak directly wrote music after hearing the spirituals, but it was sort of he got impressions from his assistant Harry Burleigh, and by listening to all the songs that Harry Burleigh was singing, he got a strong impression of what Afro-American music sounded like, and he used that in his composition of the second movement of the New World Symphony. Yes, he did. He arranged, he actually didn't write the song, but he arranged the song Deep River, and he arranged a lot of other Afro-American spirituals, and he put it together in a collection called The Jubilee Songs of the USA in 1916. And the Deep River was one of the most popular songs in that collection, and it was sung by an African-American opera singer named Marian Anderson. And she became one of the most famous opera singers in history. And back in the 1930s, she became acquainted with Eleanor Roosevelt, and Eleanor Roosevelt was very impressed with her singing, and so Eleanor Roosevelt arranged for her to sing in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And that was basically how Marian Anderson's career was jump-started. I mean, she had sung in Europe, but when she sang for the nation, you could see her on video, and she sang several selections, and she was a sensation, and that basically started her successful career in the United States. So she is a very important person historically in opera.